Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series, where I give my notes and thoughts and tips and etc. on running Out of the Abyss, the D&D 5e Underdark adventure. So we're well into the second part of this adventure now, and if this is a new series for you, what this is sort of a recap of what happened in my most recent session with my players down at my friendly local game store. Remember to support your friendly local game store. And with tips and DM thoughts, maybe some rules clarifications, but it's not an actual play. It's just more of a summary. Here's how I played it. Maybe this would be helpful for you. So that being said, if you're a new viewer, I hope you enjoy it. If you're a returning viewer, as always, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So this video, we do wrap up Mantol-Derith, and then, next session, I guess we'll be traveling to Gravenhollow, it looks like. But this video will be the wrap up of Mantol-Derith, what happened, and all that good stuff. But first, let's get to that ever popular viewer feedback. So let me put on my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we will take a look at what we can see here. So first of all, K9I99 said, speaking of summaries rather than actual plays, he said, or she said, I like session summaries. Easiest way to listen. So cool. Thanks. I'm glad you enjoy the format. I thought this would be a good way to do a video series. There's a lot of actual plays out there, and there's nothing wrong with an actual play. However, it does, you've got to get everybody together. You got to get all the sound hooked up. You got to get the video, this, that, and the other. And then also, you could get, an actual play video can be 4 hours long, and you're just wanting to find one detail. How did so-and-so run that one part? So I guess they both serve a niche. Now, I don't see a lot of this type of video where people are just summarizing. Maybe it's out there. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm pioneering it. But this is just the way I wanted to do it. I just thought I would, kind of just say, hey, here's what happened, and maybe these notes will help you. So K9I99, thank you for that feedback. All right, and the next comment is from Rob Plummer, who is a constant viewer and commenter, and we appreciate him very much. So he made a comment kind of referring to the discussion I had in the last video about the player I have. They're a good player. They're, they know their D&D. They know how to role play and all that, but sometimes they do stuff with their characters that's just very not in the spirit of the tone of the adventure or whatever may be happening in the adventure in that moment. And specifically what I had talked about was that while they were kind of studying the gem, the madness inducing gem in Mantol-Derith that actually had a demon lord in it, she was just like, oh, Duke, and had it in mage hand and just Duke, and just touched the, the most powerful drow representative in the area with it, just to see what would happen. So that kind of led into a discussion of player freedom and player agency and the sandbox creative nature of D&D versus really the tone of the adventure you're trying to run. At what point does it get to where, this is, maybe we've crossed a line and this isn't quite right. And so what Rob said, I understand all too well about your player. I have to wonder, is it a maturity thing with them? I don't know. They honestly, Rob, they don't seem immature in other areas. I think they just like to get whimsical every now and then, or playful or whatever with their characters. But I mean, I don't know. I don't see that as the cause. I have a player, and this is Rob, saying that during serious parts of our session, wants to crack jokes at an enemy, like during an enemy's monologue. It really kind of kills the mood. And I want to focus in on that. That's really, I guess, what I'm trying to get at. Is it kills the mood. As a DM or GM or whatever, you're trying to create a mood. The players are all working together to, have a collective experience. And I really feel that kind of thing kills the mood. And I feel it's unnecessary. Now, there may be groups that it's just whatever, it doesn't matter. And there may be types of adventures that it doesn't matter. But for Out of the Abyss, when you're dealing with something that heavy, it just seemed, out of character, if you will, if you'll pardon the accidental wordplay. So then Rob goes on and said, I have thought about making what he said be what he said. But usually he'll just say, "Oh, just kidding." And Rob says he dislikes it, like I do. And of course, I said, it kind of really kills the mood. Great way to identify the issue. So what I told Rob was, I think it would be interesting at some point, and the next time the player does that, just say, "Okay, well, here's how the villain or whatever responds to what you just said." And if they're like, "Hey, well, I didn't, I was just joking," it's like, "Well, did you tell me that was out of character before you said it?" And if they say no, then like, well, it's in the game now. And what I tried to clarify with Rob, and I'll try to clarify here, I really don't like to get players, like try to get them as a DM, but if something is just egregious or needs to be pointed out, I'll zing them every now and then. But anyway, and then Rob was like, "Yeah, I may do that at some point." So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And ultimately, you want to find a way, if there's tension in a game like that from different styles of play and different preferences to how they want the game to run, then maybe the DM, there's a way to resolve it, and still maintain friendship and good feelings and stuff like that. So, I don't think at this point, I would, I'd be like, "Hey, this is a real problem," and really try to hassle the player about it. Now, if it was every session, maybe. So, Vasily Chrisen said, "I'm going to steal your ideas for the detect magic on the gem." And that's where I talked about when detect magic was cast on this gem that had the Demon Lord's essence in it. I mean, it glowed like the sun, it's like, whoa, because detect magic makes magical items or effects or whatever glow. And it was just like, whoa, it's like you couldn't even hardly look at it. It was glowing so brightly. And then he also said he liked the not allowing the Zentarum to take the gem was a nice touch. And my reply on that, I said, yeah, it just seemed to, well, first of all, yeah, feel free to steal my ideas. I mean, that's definitely one of the reasons why I'm doing this video series. I'm glad you liked it well enough to want to use it. But on the thing about the Zentarum and even the Drow were like, "No, you're not taking that anywhere." It just seemed to me weird to me that all the factions, will be kind of studying this gem with a demon lord in it, and then the party would just pocket it and walk off like it's loot. Like, no, this is Zentarum business. It's happening in basically Zentarum turf, and the Drow have an interest, and so yeah, I definitely didn't want them to just use it as like a piece of loot. So, and then finally, Michael Miska, and when I gave a clarification on two-handed fighting or two-weapon fighting, dual wielding, last video, kind of went through the basic rules were for 5e. Michael said, "Hey, you missed the two-weapon fighting style for rangers and fighters. It allows you to add your stat mod to the damage." And you're right, Michael, but what I should have clarified last video, I was just talking about the basic two-weapon rules that like any character can use, not just the class specific stuff. So like if anybody, because in the where it even came up in our game was a rogue, talking about what could a rogue do. So I just wanted to go over the basic rules. But you're right, there's certain specific class specific stuff that will allow you to be even better or do different kind of stuff with dual wielding. So very, very true. So, all right, that's it for viewer feedback. So I'm going to take off my +3 spectacles at viewer feedback, and we will move on with what happened last time. So I like to, if I have certain rules clarifications or something that came up because of a session, I like to get to those first, so that they don't kind of interrupt the, when I'm kind of giving a more narrative recap of what happened. One thing that came up last session was there was a big fight with the players and some duergars, some gray dwarves, and during that fight, the one of the gray dwarves who was not enlarged decided to enlarge, and so of course you go from a medium-sized creature that is 1 square to a large creature which is basically 4 squares, right? And it just so happened that some of the PCs were close enough, player characters, to be within that 4 square range. And, there's like, well, do they get pushed back because he's, kind of hulking out and getting all big? And I think this has come up in some of our sessions before with things growing, like maybe a druid changing form, or something happening to change uh, a player's or a creature's or whatever size. And by the book, if you look up the enlarge or reduce spell in fifth edition, it basically says that if there's not enough room to grow, that they just, whatever's growing just grows to that point and stops. Um, but I see that more as like physical constraints of the environment. Now that's not what's spelled out in the book. I mean, I guess you could make that other player characters or whatever standing around you maybe prevent you from growing by the rules as written, not rules as interpreted. So that so say you're trying to grow and you're in a you're 5 foot tall and the ceiling's only 6 foot, and then you hit enlarge, you're like boop, and you just stop. Do you even get any benefits of growing? I don't know. That seems a little weird to me. I guess maybe you could lay down and grow and then still get the extra strength and whatever. But what I ruled, and I just ruled this, I have a feeling that I ruled against rules as written, was that yes, if you're near a creature that enlarges all of a sudden and you're within that 4 square blocks that the newly enlarged character or creature or whatever would occupy, then you're pushed back. And I didn't do anything like, hey, you're pushing somebody else and take damage or anything like that, but I did allow the duergar to and push back the other players. Welcome your thoughts on that, how you would handle that. How do you handle if somebody's throwing enlarge and normally they're going to double their size, they're going to go 12 feet, but they can only go to 8 feet because of the ceiling or the walls or something. Do they still get their strength bonuses and things from enlarge? I don't know. These are the things where you could, I'm sure there's some weird ruling out there. There's some rule that you could guideline you could apply to that. But these are the things where it's like, if you tried to write rule books to cover every possible scenario that would come up, I mean, the rule book would be like that thick, if not, larger. Cause it's like, oh, well, enlarging to 8 feet, enlarging to 9 feet, enlarging to 10 feet, how many characters are around him when he's enlarging? So anyway, that was just kind of something that came up. I love to hear your thoughts on that. Or if you've dealt with that before, or how you dealt with it. So we kind of resetting to the beginning of this session. At the end of last session, they had just destroyed the gym, and you had the big sort of the Sauron Lord of the Rings, poof, and people falling over, and the voice was like, "I will honor the agreement," as the Demon Lord went back to the abyss. So that's one less Demon Lord they have to deal with, and the Warlock player, they stated, "Hey, we're gathering up the pieces of the Shattered Gem." That's okay. That's fine. At that point, the Zhentarim and the Drow weren't really that concerned about it. So the Warlock gathered up the gem pieces. As it turns out, later they're going to use the mending spell to kind of try to put the gem back together to some point. And again, I didn't go get super particular with the mend spell. I did for the purposes of what they were trying to do and everything. I said it's okay because they were going to have to do a deception check with it anyway. But it's possible by the book, if I would have looked up mend, that maybe it wouldn't work. I don't know, but I went ahead and allowed. Now, what I did say was, when they mended the gem back together, not all the pieces were there. So it's like, yeah, you have kind of a gem, but it doesn't look quite the same, but you do have a big black gem that's similar, but not exact to what it looked like before. I mean, in close inspection, people are going to be like, well, what? I don't think that was the gem I first had in my hand. If they're in their rational mind, which, will come into play. So, another thing that, I pointed out to the players when I had the Zhentarim and the Drow were, taking their leave, or the Drow were taking their leave because the meeting's over basically. And they're like, hey, due to the circumstances, we'll talk another time about our original business. Cause the original agenda is they were going to talk about, taking out the Svirfneblum and the Grey Dwarves and taking over Mantol-Derith for themselves. And that got interrupted by A, the PC showing up, and then B, the the drow like, for the honor of my house or whatever, and attacking the beholder, who did get his drow snacks last video in a very, very gruesome way. So they were like, hey, we'll talk later, and all of that. And a couple of things happened as the drow were leaving story-wise. One, the lead drow, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. It's like Sarah. I don't know. She's the one that, she's the chief negotiator. She like looked at everybody, and specifically the warlock, the one that had touched her with a gem, and was like, yes, we must. I must go back to our enclave anyway, because we have, important news to report to Minzo Bronzen about hostile aggression, hostile acts from agents of King Bruiner towards to the drow, referring to, the little gem touch on her. And by the way, the drow did accumulate some madness from that, but it was a madness that basically said, I don't tell people my true motives under any circumstance. So although she's developed madness, it's hard to detect in her, because she kind of operates that way anyway. But anyway, yeah, she's like, and then the player's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you're kind of agents of King Bruiner here. You're kind of here. Everybody knows that you're kind of here because he asked you to come. Now, I guess if we really pressed it, because when they were at Gauntlgrim and the players were working with the different factions, it was so that King Bruiner could appear neutral as far as gathering their support. However, King Bruiner did send them into the Underdark and outfitted them and all of this. So I kind of went ahead, I was like, how do I make this even more serious, what this player did to this drow story-wise? And I thought that was a nice way to handle it, because they were like, what? And they're like, oh yeah, they're like, yeah, we're kind of here on behalf of King Bruiner. And the player who instigated everything was like, well, what about, I thought they were just mad at me. And they're like, oh, well, there's personal vengeance on you. The house is personally after you, but diplomatically and formally, they now have sort of a pretense to have a grievance, against King Bruiner and Gauntlgrim because of what you did. Because, the case can be made that you were here because King Bruiner invited you and sent you into the Underdark. So they're like, oh. So I don't know if I'll have anything come out of that story-wise down the road, but I did that on purpose because I want to keep stressing the seriousness. If you're going to get silly and whimsical in the adventure, it's going to have fallout. Especially if you do something like that. So, but anyway, I don't think I'm going to pursue it any further. We'll probably get into the drow vengeance thing at some point in the future with this party, this group, assuming that player character stays involved. But it's been delayed by a year for now, due to clever negotiating over whether to destroy the gem or not. So the drow kind of took their leave. And I thought this was a very nice touch. As the drow were leaving, the bard, who's a half elf, remembered when they were in Neverlight Grove, and there was that drow who was kind of buried in that garden where it was just a bunch of like heads sticking up, and some of them were alive and like, kill us and stuff like that. Which isn't creepy or anything at all. And they remembered her, and the warning, she said, please warn my people, and had given the holy symbol of Lolth, to the group. And so they remembered that. And the bard went over and said, hey, by the way, we have, completely unrelated to everything that just went on, we have something to tell you, basically. And the lead drow, she's like very, because here's a half elf which, an elf's bad enough. But, this crossbreed surface elf thing, it's like, so I think I had the player, roll like a persuasion or something to get her to listen. Rolled very well, so she listened. And he's like, here's the this drow want us to warn you about the demon lord activity in Neverlight Grove, and I think it was Zuktmoy. So and also I don't know if this is lore actually from D&D or the Forgotten Realms, or if it's lore that this player has come up with. I'm not sure, but he's a really creative player, and he came up. He had in the past stated that he had, when that drow died, that elf, and she was like, "Please warn my people," and everything. Something about growing out like almost like a Padawan strand of hair, and then to a certain point during the mourning, and then when the mourning period is over, they cut it off and keep it as a remembrance. I don't know if that's from D&D or Forgotten Realms or some other whatever, or if this player came up with it, but it was nice. And they've mentioned it to me before in prior adventures when an elf has died, that this character has done the same thing. Well, anyway, when that dark elf drow died in Neverlight Grove, and it said, "Please warn my people," then this character had gone through a period of mourning for that drow, and gave the hair over to the lead drow negotiator here. And I'm like, I don't know how to handle. I don't know if they, here's a half elf saying have some hair. I don't know how the drow would work with that. But what I did, because the persuasion roll and everything was really well done on, it was a really high roll to say, "Hey, listen to me, give you this warning," because we were specifically asked to warn Menzoberranzan on behalf of this, drow elf that died a horrible death. It was like she's a priestess of Loth, junior priestess or something. Here's the holy symbol. Here's her name, all that. I just role played it that, I'm going to look up her name. Hold on a second. And through the magic of video editing, suddenly I have a book in my hands. So the lead negotiator, again, her name is Sirac Mazalor, or Sirac. She's the chief negotiator for the drow in Mantol-Derith. And then in Neverlight Grove, that it was an acolyte of Loth named Zanaya, I believe. So there was that. And I just thought that was a really nice role-playing moment. That's kind of when D&D transcends being murder hobos and, something that can be poignant. So I went ahead and role played it like that. The lead negotiator was kind of like, just looked at the bard, kind of unreadable, and then kind of nodded and took the hair, and then left. So I'm as the DM, I'm in my mind, I'm like, well, believe it or not, that drow was actually kind of touched a little bit, and is going to take the warning back, even though by this point, I'm not sure how important the warning is, because it's, everybody's aware that there's craziness going on in the Underdark. But anyway, that was a nice moment on behalf of my player, going out of their way to do that. So I thought that was nice. So they went back to the pavilion, the Zentarum pavilion, to meet with Gazram Dulac, who again is the chief negotiator for the Zentarum, and is also the person they've been sent to find to say, hey, this person can get you to Gravenhollow, and and then Gravenhollow is the library of the Stone Giants, so maybe you can find information about the Underdark, what's going on, the madness, and and so it's kind of a shot in the dark. Again, excuse the play on words on trying to get something going. So they were like, what about the food? Because that decanter of endless water had spun around and jetted water out and knocked a bunch of food over, and they had remembered that, and I didn't. And I basically had Gazram tell the junior whoever Zentarum thugs, whatever, running around, like, clean this up, bring us some more food and whatever. And, you know, he's kind of pouring a goblet of wine and, you know, drinking wine and kind of collecting himself after, you know, the recent events. Beholder's gone. All of the Zentarum acolytes ended up leaving except for, you know, a couple, not acolytes, you know, the Zentarum thug kind of underlings. And then, of course, you've got the two underlings that are hanging out with the players as part of the expedition. So they were all kind of, you know, eating and, you know, drinking wine or whatever. One of the, I guess the monks has a flaw on their character that, you know, that they love to drink and they'll drink to excess and, you know, get kind of crazy. So, you know, one of the other players was, you know, every time they'd pick up a goblet, you know, they were pushing it back down and trying to keep them from drinking. So that was fun. And it's nice to have little role-playing stuff like that. Anyway, so Gazarum, even though they're, you know, technically they've been sent to him to, you know, ask him, hey, can you help us get to Gravenhollow? And really by the rules, I guess, of his superiors or how the Zentarum worked, you know, he probably could have just done that. What do you need from me? And then give him the ring that he's going to give him and be done with it. But instead I had him because I'm thinking this is, you know, one of those people that's going to try to collect as much information as they can. He really pumped the players for information. And I mean, they were, yeah, this is happening. I mean, they just told him everything. You know, I guess kind of forgetting that he's, you know, really kind of the mafia or whatever. And, you know, I guess they didn't know that they didn't have to answer his questions. But yeah, he pumped them for basically all kinds of information. And they just told him all, you know, everything they knew for the most part. And, you know, that was just a fun role-playing part. They probably have no clue, you know, I was doing that, but it was kind of fun for me to get in the head of one of the NPCs that they're dealing with who could, you know, possibly end up being a villain down the road, I guess. Not likely, but I guess it could happen. So, and I played him as very polite, but slightly distant and cold. You know, he's kind of calculating, and that's how I've been playing him. He's constantly assessing the situation and weighing the variables of things and taking the measure of people and things and situations. And so that's kind of how I played him. But eventually they did get down to brass tacks, as it were. And they said, he's like, okay, so what do you require of me? And they, you know, and they basically, well, we were told to come find you because you supposedly can get us to Gravenhollow. And he kind of looks at him for a moment and he's like, and he pops off this ring. And by the book, he has this ring that can, let's find the Zentarum Enclave. Yeah, this is on page 141 under treasure. Hold on a second. He also wears a gold ring fitted with a star ruby, which is worth 1,000 gold pieces. A detect magic spell reveals that the gem radiates a faint aura of divination magic. The gem's star-shaped core is a magical compass that guides the ring's wearer along the safest, shortest route to Gravenhollow. Gazarum is aware of the ring's property and gives the ring to the characters if they claim to be headed that way. So, you know, no, he's like, okay, here you go. And the way I played it was, you know, even though he probably didn't want to give up that ring, you know, he knew that other Zentarum, like the Zentarum faction representative of Gauntlet Grim, and was in the middle of all this and had sent other Zentarum to support the expedition. So he's like, you know, I'm basically, I have to give it to you. I mean, he didn't say that to them, but that's kind of how I calculated it in my head. So he just, okay, popped it and gave it to him, said, and explained that will act as a compass to guide you through the safest, shortest route to Gauntlet, or not to Gauntlet, to Gravenhollow. And he's like, and with that, our business concludes. And, you know, he very coldly but politely said, you know, we're kind of done here. And, you know, I wish you well, you know, and then, you know, kind of started heading back to the Zentarum Enclave, which the players never went into the Zentarum Enclave. There's a whole, you know, I recommend that you read the book. For, you know, there's treasure and all kinds of stuff in the Zentarum Enclave. There's a secret one of those secret doors that can blast the heck out of you if you don't have the code word, can let you in there, or you can go in through the front. There's all kinds of sheds and just all kinds of stuff in there. Of course, you got the beholder in there, who's Lorthun, the maimed beholder, who guards the warehouse. So there's a whole thing going on here that we didn't, the players never actually went into. Now, one thing about Gazarim, the way the book describes him, said he's born into a wealthy family, and he has the typically smarmy demeanor of the Omnian aristocracy, coupled with a biting sense of humor that he uses to diffuse tense situations. He's not afraid of a good fight, but is averse to attacking a superior force. If he realizes the characters are in league with the Black Network, he offers them food, wine, and whatever else they need to complete their mission. So, and then there's treasure here where you can give lanterns and this and that and the other. But I didn't even go into all that because, the expedition's basically supplied and, has all this stuff. So we didn't even go into any of that. But, keep in mind, if you want there to be, there's more to the Zentarum enclave and encounter. And again, I played him different than the book. I kind of liked him as more of this very business-like, unemotional, tactician, really, negotiator kind. So anyway, from that point, the players are like, what do we do? And, obviously they're like, well, we want to go save Yantha Coax Rock. And at this point, a couple of the players had mentioned, it's been a while. I hope Yantha is still okay. And, I talked about that in previous videos because when they found out that Yantha was in danger, the Grey Dwarves had her. And in fact, she's in very dire danger. They didn't beeline it to go save her. But again, the way I had DM'd things, I think put a little bit more emphasis on the Zentarum meeting than I meant to. So they're like, do we go with Zentarum or do we go to save Yantha? And well, our main mission here is to connect with the Zentarum, so we're going to go to the Zentarum. So I can't really fault them for that. But at the same time, I was like, well, she's in danger. So I kind of struggled with how to do that. And I changed it slightly once they actually found her, but I had decided to say she's dead. She's just dead because you took too long to get to her. Now, the book doesn't say that, but as the DM, I'm like, well, if they know she's in trouble and, she's in imminent danger of being loaded in or lowered down into the mouth of a xorn covered in a gem-encrusted robe, because the xorn is going to want to eat those gems and it's going to crush all over her with its mouth. It's like this James Bond death trap. Yeah, I kind of felt like time was of the essence. But then again, it's D&D. I mean, you can have whatever you want to have happen whenever you want to have it happen. So they're, starting to get the sense that, hey, maybe this is time of the essence with Yantha. So they decided to head to the duergar area, which is in the, let me double check here. I have a hard time keeping Mantol-Derith straight in my head because the map is sideways in the book. So I'm always wanting to see the directions as being a bit off. But the duergar is in the southeast quadrant of Mantol-Derith. Now, the duergar, let's see, that starts on page 138 and it goes through 139 to describe the duergar enclave. And one thing that where I feel like they kind of messed up or didn't give enough information, because the players started asking me and I just kind of had to make it up, was each of these enclaves has a kind of a fungal grove before you get to the main enclave. It's kind of just an area with fungus. In some cases, it's tended. Some cases it's gotten kind of overgrown. In the case of the duergar, it says that the grove says an iron wrought fence encloses this fungal grove through which the duergar have carved narrow aisles. So I kind of see that as like a garden, right? The grove contains a host of edible fungi and is illuminated by 6 nightlight mushrooms. A tunnel in the south wall leads to a set of double stone doors. So there's a couple things here about this description that are lacking, in my opinion. One, you don't really get a sense of how long this tunnel is, but if you look at the map, you can guess it's about 40 feet long and about 20 feet wide. The other thing is it talks about a fence, right? So let's look at this fence. An iron wrought fence encloses this fungal grove. Okay, so does this fence have an opening? Does it have a gate? How do people get in and out of this fence? Because best I can tell by the book, there's not a secret exit out of the Duergar enclave to, where you don't need to go through the fence. So, and of course, my characters or my players, well, is there a gate? So I just said, yeah, there's a gate, sure. And I said it was locked. And so of course they're checking it for traps and this and that. And I just made it a no trap lock on this gate with a DC 10 to get it open. So not that big of a deal. They also said, how tall is this fence? I don't know. 8 feet? Sure. I don't know. So just be prepared. It's possible. I mean, if you put a fence around a story area in a game, it's, possible and really not out, almost expected that your players are going to start asking questions. So just, you got to kind of improvise that. Another thing that once they go into this grove, it says guarding the fungi grove are 4 invisible duergar that attack intruders on sight. And then there's 4 more invisible duergar standing in front of the double doors that attack any non-duergar that come into view. Now, I changed that up slightly just to try to have a little bit more interesting of an encounter. What I did was, they went in, they were looking. They mentioned they were, kind of trying to see, do I see footprints? Do I detect? They were using perception to try to detect if there's any invisible duergar, because they've been here in Mantol-Derith long enough to know that there's invisible duergar running around attacking people. They've had a couple of big fights that way. And I had already determined in my mind that the duergar are just going to be really still and really quiet while they're invisible, and so the things that the players were asking me, didn't reveal the duergar. So they kind of went to the grove and checked it out, and they kind of, verified that this is all edible fungus. So I guess this is like a garden. And they went through into the tunnel. And what I had was, as they were going down the tunnel, there were, I just put 4 regular sized, duergar that they're supposed to be, it says 4 more invisible, duergar stand in front of the double doors and attack any non-duergar that come into view. I left them visible. And now the invisible duergar that are in the garden, I had them enlarged. So, but the ones in front of the doors they're just, regular duergar guards. And now what I did do by the book is it says that the ones in front of the door attack any non-duergar that come into view. I mean, that's their whole drive. Hey, if you see anybody coming down this tunnel that is not a Grey Dwarf, attack. And so that's what he did. So the players, they're kind of headed down, and they tried to talk. They tried to, begin a conversation with the dwarves or the Grey Dwarf guards that they could see. And the Grey Dwarf just attacked. So, I had your kind of standard combat going on. And this is where, because I had the map drawn out and, had all the characters placed in the duergar. And this was the encounter where one of the duergar guards, at least in one case, enlarged. And I was like, how do I handle the fact that there's too many people around him, but there's space for them to get pushed back? I just had him push them back. Still curious to see I'm sure there's some guideline out there that tells me I shouldn't do it that way, but I don't know. And then what I had, I think starting on the second round, I think, may have been in the first round, but on the second round, I had those enlarged, Grey Dwarves start attacking from the rear. And that's what I did. I just wanted to kind of bottle them up and give them a little bit more interesting of a fight, even though I knew they would handle it without much problem. Because, I mean, they've just been wiping enlarged duergar out left and right. Like, they've killed probably 20-something in Mantol-Derith after more than that. Maybe even close to 30. It's kind of ridiculous. But anyway, and so of course, while they were fighting in the marching order, the cleric and the bard were in back. So the enlarged duergar started wailing on the cleric and the bard, which again I didn't think would be a major threat, and it ended up being not a huge threat, but it did kind of put a little bit of a interesting twist on things, and give the players at least the feeling, the perception of a more of a threatening fight. So that was cool. Anyway, they finished all that up, and by the book, it does say, let's see. It just said the stone double doors to the warehouse are unlocked and open to reveal a 40-foot high rough-hewn chamber containing 30 duergar merchants and 12 male steeders. Now, a steeder is basically a huge tarantula that's used as a beast of burden. It says these duergar aren't spoiling for a fight and parley with intruders, sharing the following information. So, once the fight's over, the doors are unlocked, and they can just push the doors open and walk in. There's a bunch of, duergar there. And, I made it very clear. I just described, these seem like merchants or whatever. They don't seem like warrior gray dwarves. And, they don't seem, they're like startled, by your appearance, but it doesn't look like that they're about to rush an attack or anything like that. I made it clear that the steeders were just, they weren't like war steeders or something like that. So, they started talking in Dwarvish, I think. A couple of the characters can speak Dwarvish, so they started talking in Dwarvish with them, and got the information. And this is right in the book. Under the Duergar enclave, it says a Svirfneblum mage stole a gemstone from a Duergar El merchant named Crimgul Musgart. Crimgul is a good friend of Mantol-Derith's Duergar chief negotiator, Golder Flagonfist. When the Svirfneblum mage refused to return the stolen gem, Flagonfist sent invisible duergar to the Svirfneblum enclave to capture her and bring her to him for questioning. And the Svirfneblum mage is Yantha Coaxrock, okay, who was from Neverlight Grove. No, not Neverlight Grove. Blending Stone. Other Svirfneblum tried to free the mage, leading the first of several armed confrontations. Flagonfist has since sent his Duergar guards to storm the neighboring enclave and wipe out the Deep Gnomes, which of course the players already interrupted that and saved the Deep Gnomes. So also in here, now there is, you might want to look around, this is a warehouse, there's treasure in here, but the treasure is really more in the there's weapons and this and that. The Duergar Grey Dwarves trade mostly in armor and weapons of superior craftsmanship, but their enclave also deals in other metalwork, raw ores, and uncut gemstones. The Duergar chief negotiator is Golder Flagonfist, who sells armor, arrowheads, locks, mining, and smithing equipment, and smoked Dark Lake fish. So, and then he's friends with Crimgul Musgart, a Grey Dwarf merchant who sells frothy Dark Lake Stout Ale. So, in addition to just like weapons and armor, there is an iron safe in here. Weighs 1,000 pounds. It's locked and contains 1d4 magic items if you roll on table B. And that's basically it. Now, other treasure, the gem-studded robe that Yantha is wearing to be chomped on by the Xorn is worth 750 gold pieces. So basically, they share all that. The Grey Dwarves basically share this with the players, because they're kind of like, whoa, they see wacky stuff's going on, and at one point they're like, well, where is Yantha? And they're like, whoa, there. And there's kind of a room, a building, I guess, inside this enclave. It says a 20-foot high stone building stands in the northeast corner of the warehouse. Inside this unlocked building, Golder Flagonfist and Crimgul Musgart, who are a pair of male Duergar, are interrogating Yantha Coaxrock, an unarmed female deep gnome suffering from a form of indefinite madness that makes her tell lies even at the risk of harming herself and others. The Duergar have dressed her in a robe sewn with gemstones, which is mentioned in the treasure, 750 gold pieces, and suspended her above the mouth of Golder's pet, in quotes, a hungry Xorn. Golder grasps the rope from which she hangs and is threatening to feed her to the Xorn unless she divulges the location of the gems she stole from Crimgul. And it talks about Yantha, she's the leader of um, the Stoneheart Enclave and Blending Stone. She's bound with rope, and I mean, she is just spilling or spinning elaborate lies uh, about how the drow charmed her and took Krimgall's gem and all that. Now, what I had determined was that the Yantha would be dead when the players arrived. So at this point, the players start heading towards the door to that little building where they're basically torturing Yantha to death in, and the doors open, and these two duergar, the chief negotiator and his buddy, the merchant that, have kicked off this whole thing. And they're talking in Dwarvish, and they're like, well, that was a waste of time. And, what do we do now? And the players are like, uh-oh, that doesn't sound good. Because by this point they're, they got, for on their own without me prodding them, like I said that before, they started kind of talking about, well, maybe we need to hurry up. So they, they're like, uh-oh. And then, the two duergar are walking out are like, well, who are you? And, it gets kind of hostile real quick. And the players, they engaged in which I thought was cool, rather than just, pulling swords and killing. They kind of got into a role-playing session with these two hostile kind of Greyjoys, like, why are you in here? Why are you here? This is not good. You should not be here. We don't like that. Plus they just, they're upset because they just killed what they think is their only lead on getting that gem back, which is really incredibly important to the merchant. And this, the lead negotiator who's buddies with the merchant, I guess it's really important to him now too. So, they keep talking. I can't remember the entire conversation, but it basically came down to, hey, where is Yantha? We have the gem. And as a matter of fact, it was the drow who had the gem. It wasn't Yantha, and so all this is going on. And of course, like I said, they, earlier in the session, they had taken the pieces and mended the gem. And, Krimgall, who's the merchant who had the gem stolen from him, really, really wants this gem. And, he's wants it bad enough that the fact that it's been mended or whatever, he's kind of mad, kind of gone crazy, and he just wants his gem. So, he wasn't too put off by that. But what the players did was they did say, well, there was kind of a demon lord in it, and we got rid of the demon lord. And I was like, I'm thinking as the DM, like, I probably wouldn't have told them that, because now maybe they're going to think the gem's broken or something. But during all of this, the bard, who's the lead negotiator, of course, for the party, rolled a nice deception. So they basically worked out, okay, give us the gem. And these two duergar, these influential duergar, who had, basically part of starting this whole warfare with the Svirfneblum, bought it. They're like, those drow, we should have known. Which is actually, I wasn't even thinking about it when at the time when the players were blaming on the drow, but that kind of matches up with what Yantha was telling them by the book. So they were like, drow. So they worked out a deal. They said, we're going to take Yantha. You can have the gem. And, the lead negotiator, Golder or whatever, was like, do it and get out immediately. And, started saying, guards to the armory, get the big weapons, blah, blah, blah. And I tried to explain to the characters, you don't get the sense that you're about to be attacked, but he's doing a show of force. Like, if you don't leave immediately after you get Yantha, he's going to leave you. He's going to escort you out in a very, aggressive way. So they go in and they're looking around this room, and I kind of describe it to them. And, off in one corner, I said, you see a xorn, and xorns are these really weird, like, three-legged things with I think they're three-legged, and they've got these mouths that go upwards. So the mouth is like that. It's not like this. It's like that. And they love precious metal and gems, like sometimes in dungeons. And they're neutral. They're neutral creatures. They're not overtly hostile. but they're semi. I think they're like intelligence of 10 or something. I don't know, but they'll follow adventures around in dungeons, hoping to get precious metals and gems and stuff like that. But with Yantha being in the this jewel encrusted robe, the xorn, he just wants those gems. What's inside the robe is totally secondary to it. It just wants those gems. So they're looking around and they're like, "Where's Yantha?" And I'm like, well, in the way I describe it, by the book, there's like off in one corner there, and I said there's kind of a rope tossed over a beam, dangling down, and under that rope there's this xorn, and the xorn is just munching, and I don't think they got it at first, but it dawned on them pretty quick. They're like, oh, so they kind of went over. I said there's kind of something in this xorn's mouth that it's chomping on, and they got closer, and it said it kind of looks like a cloth or a robe or something, covered in gems, and then they come to further reveal that Yantha is inside, and they're like, it's kind of a creepy moment, like the reveal in like the horror movie or whatever, and they're like, was she alive? I'm like, So they, I think they ended up kind of, some of them pulling on the rope. I just said the rope was still attached to her, and it started pulling her out, and some others kind of got the robe off of her as they were pulling her out, and left the robe. It's because the xorn's like, wanting its, hey, where's my food going? And so they got the robe off of Yantha and into the xorn, where it munched happily. And at that point, it was like, whatever, it didn't really care about the player characters. It was just eating its snack or whatever. Actually, probably a feast for it. So again, they're like, is Yantha dead? And up to that point, I had been like, she's going to be dead. She's going to be straight up dead. But I decided, because I had kind of teased the Zentarum a little more than I should have. So I kind of gave him this agonize. Do we go to Yantha? Do we go to the Zentarum? And just spur of the moment anyway, I was like, I think it would just be more interesting to do it this way. So here's what I said. I think the cleric had medicine skill, did medicine's check on her or something. And I said, she's just barely, she's as close to dead as you could be without being dead. She's all crunched up and beat up, and it doesn't look good. So what I spur of the moment, I decided, I said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. She's already failed 2 death saving throws. And so, the way it works when you're dying in D&D is you keep rolling death saves until either you get 3 successes or 3 failures, and then you either live or die. You either stabilize or you die. And I said, we're going to put her at the point where she's had 2 failed death saves, and this is her final one. I'm going to roll it right now. And depending, before they even have a chance to try to heal her or anything, because they didn't say we cast healing. They didn't say, they just said we're checking her to see if she's alive. I said, I'm going to roll this D20, and she'll either die right now. If she gets a death, if she fails at this death save, she's dead. If not, she's barely alive, and y'all can do something. So boy, I rolled that dice out in the open on the table. I was watching that dice, and death saves an up or down. 10 or more, you succeed. Less than 10, you fail. And I rolled above a 10. I can't remember what it was. They were like, hey, whoosh, and they were all, and which actually made for a cool moment, like this knuckle biting moment, which I think was actually more interesting than just saying, well, she's dead. But I still like the idea of you waiting to come get her, put it into this tense situation. So, they healed her, whatever. And one or two of the players was like, well, it's a good thing she survived, because if not, we were going to take these dwarves out. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad she survived too, because I didn't want to go through another big, huge combat of just killing dwarves. I wanted to wrap Mantol-Derith tonight, and we were like at the end of the session. So, what we did was, I said, look, because I'm ready to move. We've been in Mantol-Derith for several sessions. I'm ready to move it on. We only get to play, 2.5 hours on any given session once a week. And I said, if there's still stuff that you want to do Mantol-Derith, I said, we totally can do that. I said, if there's nothing that, the party or individual people here, like they really want to check out Mantol-Derith, I said, can we just kind of narrate and montage the wrap up and say that next session you're back on your expedition headed to Gravenhollow. And, you know, and I made it real clear. I said, if y'all want to keep doing Mantol-Derith, we can keep checking it out. And because there is still some stuff they haven't done. And they're like, no, we're cool. We've got the ring. We're ready to go. So we just kind of montaged and narrated that they got, you know, Yantha back to the Svirfneblum and, you know, spread the news of the madness and the gem and this and that and the other. And, you know, so they never went. And so at the beginning of next set, we're basically done with Mantol-Derith, right? We just kind of, you know, like, again, montaged kind of, here's what all happens. And the Svirfneblum are happy. And, you know, even though there's madness in the Underdark and there's tensions between the factions, you know, the direct threat of the Demon Lord and the gem right here in Mantol-Derith is done. Now, I would really recommend that you spend some time looking at the chapter of Mantol-Derith, because there's some stuff that they just flat didn't do in Mantol-Derith. They never went to the Zentarum or the Drow Enclave at all. And there's a kind of a subplot. There was another person that Yantha knows. Her assistant was also involved with this madness. And if you know, if you want to play it this way, when you rescue Yantha, you know, she's like, oh, I gave the black gem to my apprentice Flink. You know, she doesn't know where Flink is, but she uses a sending spell to contact him, where he's learns that he's trapped, quote unquote, in the Drow Enclave. So now it says if the characters rescue Yantha, award each of them 100 XP. If they cure her madness, award an additional 150 XP to each character. Now they did rescue her, but they don't have greater restoration or anything. You know, they keep saying, oh, we don't have greater restoration. So they didn't cure her madness that I'm aware of, but you can use Flink, her assistant, as a way to get people over to the Drow Enclave. And, you know, I think Flink had the gem, and then I think the gargoyle got the gem from Flink, and then the gargoyle gave the gem to the Drow, and, you know, who attacked the beholder and all that. So it's just these dominoes continuing to fall over. But if they go to the Drow Enclave and warehouse, you know, there's this whole other little area that they can do. I mean, I don't believe that it adds a whole lot to the storyline. Now there is an NPC named Zilchin Kuleptin, who is a Drow mage that the players can meet. Yeah, it says if you go to page 142. It says follow-up encounters, having Slatus Vader, who could be found in Mantol-Derith, but they didn't. Peebles, who I didn't even include in Mantol-Derith, or Zilchin Kuleptin. Now, if they had gone to the Drow area, I would have had them encounter Zilchin. But it says if they join the party, it can lead to special follow-up encounters in the vicinity of Mantol-Derith. But I have completely, for time, I didn't mess with any of this in my campaign. But, you know, be aware that it is there. Now, if one other thing you want to know, if the characters deduce that Kinyul's gem is responsible for the havoc in Mantol-Derith, which they did, and inform the chief negotiators of this fact, the ones who are still alive, and in this case, all 4 chief negotiators are still alive in our campaign, are thankful enough to share disturbing news from their home settlements of Blendingstone, Gracklestug, and Menzo-Baranzan, respectively. So, and it says, see chapter 10, Descent into the Depths. In the next chapter, which again, I've said before, should have been included before Mantol-Derith chapter 9, because it's got all this information about traveling in the Underdark, and it's got what's going on in other areas of the Underdark. You know, it's got information about what's happening in Blendingstone right now, the Dark Lake, Slugbludop, Gracklestug, Menzo-Baranzan, Neverglight Grove, Valkenvelve, etc. So if you know, either in this chapter, if you want to have the chief negotiator share this information, or if the players ask at some point in the adventure, or if you get something where it comes up where it would naturally come up, you could tell them, well, here's what's going on in Gracklestug now, or here's what's going on in Neverlight Grove now, that, you know, things have progressed. So that information is in there. I didn't personally go into it with my characters, but you know, it may come up again, but I didn't share it in the method that the book suggests. So anyway, that's it for this session. Hope you enjoyed the recap. Next session will be some travel, probably. I'm struggling with whether I just want to get them right to Gravenhollow or if I want to do some travel. There's the next chapter. It does have some interesting travel encounters, and then also you can set up these outposts that I guess, you know, there's certain game benefits from having the outposts, including communication back to, you know, Godle Grim and other stuff. So as they're going along, they're establishing these little outposts and leaving some of the expedition members with. And that would also be a good way to explain, you know, how you could get a replacement character in quickly, you know, to the party or whatever. So I'm kind of on the fence of how much of chapter 10, as far as the actual travel stuff, I'm going to do before they get to Gravenhollow. But anyway, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you would, leave this video a thumbs up and maybe a comment. That helps me out a lot on YouTube. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. We will catch you next time on Shane Plays.